This is Platemark with me, Ann Schaefer. I'm an independent curator specializing in prints, drawings, and photographs, but my special love is prints. Platemark is a podcast about prints in the printmaking ecosystem. This series is Series 3. I'm interviewing people who occupy various roles in the ecosystem, and if you've been listening, you know that I love talking to printers. Today, I've got one of those on tap. I'm so excited. My guest today is Leslie Diuguid. She is the owner, operator, and founder of Diuguid Press in Bed-Stuy Brooklyn. She is incredible. Diuguid Press is screen print focused, and we get into it deep. We've got our super deep dive today into screen printing, and we get into that thing that we've been talking about a lot lately, moiré patterns, and why they happen, and are they good or bad? So stay tuned for that. I'm also happy to report that Leslie is going to be an exhibitor at the Brooklyn Fine Art Print Fair in March, which I am helping Luther Davis organize for Powerhouse Arts. I just wanted to put a plug in there. A lot of our past guests are going to be exhibitors, and when you come to the fair, you will see these folks and you'll say, you know what, I listened to your episode of Platemark, and you'll feel like you know them, which will be awesome because that will make sticking your hand out and saying hello that much easier. All right, let's see. Housekeeping. I identify as a cishet white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her. I record Platemark in Baltimore, Maryland, the land of the Piscataway Conoy people. Images that Leslie and I talk about are over in the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. Also over there, you can click through to join our Facebook group, or you can leave me a message and tell me you have somebody in mind that you would like me to talk to, or you could hit the support and donate button and help me keep the lights on. All right, I think that's it. Let's get rolling. Leslie, it's lovely to see you. Thank you so much for coming on Platemark.
Thank you for having me, Anne. I'm really honored to be here.
I know you've been on my list for a long time. So, Leslie, before we get too far, introduce yourself for everybody.
Great. My name is Leslie Diuguid. I'm a screen printer, owner, operator, founder of Diuguid Press. And I've newly established a print shop in Bed-Stuy. My location is Patchen Avenue and Van Buren.
So you do screen printing, not silk screening, because nobody uses silk anymore. But and you make all sorts of things? No, you only make one kind of screen print.
I've been breaking down my categories into just piles so that I can have better systems for these buckets. It's difficult for me to be doing so many different types of printing, even though it's all with the screen. There's graphic qualities you could do. There's one-offs. There's a lot of different types of painterly breakdowns of halftone, so the different publishing adventures I've been doing try to showcase that. Personally, I really like collaborating with artists, and everyone has great ideas. That's not really a problem. I just want to put my best foot forward to amplify their ideas.
That's the mark of a great collaborative printer.
Thank you. Well, good.
You're welcome. You recently moved into a storefront space on a first floor, and I think on a corner. Yep. People wander in and say, "Can you do my t-shirts for me?"
The first question I get was like, "What is this?" So I have the opportunity to be specific and say fine art printing, and that word fine art doesn't necessarily translate to paper prints, so people will be like, I have a fine art idea. It's a t-shirt, and I'm like, not quite. But it was a dry cleaner too, so it's especially confusing. People will, not so much anymore that we've redone the sign, but people would come in with bags of clothes, and I'm like, don't come in. So like, this isn't a dry cleaner anymore, even though it says Rodriguez Dry Clean. It's like, great to be on a first floor for access to get big machines in here. But at the same time, there's a different beast that comes with being confusing to the community.
Well, they'll get it soon, right? You're going to be a fixture there for a long time.
Oh, of course. I'm so happy to have so many wonderful people stopping by and just sharing their support by being neighborly. Good morning. My name is Teresa. Hi, I'm Leslie. And it's a new thing I started doing with neighbors just to keep them straight, right? Because I've been greeting people, giving out business cards is another way to be specific about what you do and share what you're interested in and passionate about. But one way that helps me remember names lately is to just do little sketches of everyone who comes in.
Oh,
They don't
brilliant.
know I'm doing it. I don't do it while they're around, but I will secretly do a little, 1 or 2 minute sketch of anyone who shows up that I speak to, give a card to. And it helps me really. I've only been doing this the last couple of weeks, but like it really helps me remember all the people that I want to remember instead of just saying, hey, you again.
I believe in that name thing also. I have an idea about the significant strangers in our lives, like, the person who checks out your groceries every week or 5 times a week, however often you're there, whatever. And so I have friendships with a lot of these people, and I feel like it changes the way you navigate through life to be friendly with all these folks and know their names.
It really is a protection element also. It's great to have familiarity with people you see all the time. But the other thing is I leave the shop sometimes at 3 or 4 a.m. and it's a little scary to be so close to Broadway in Brooklyn, and there's a lot of halfway houses. Everyone's very friendly. But, I know there's a lot of people that aren't so high up on their luck, it maybe would need someone to take advantage of. And I don't want to make myself susceptible to that kind of thing. So I do know my neighbors can hear my gate rise and lower. So they'll say like, "Oh, you were here late last night." And I'm like, "Thank you for noticing. I was here late. I'm barely here in the morning ever." But yeah, it's really great to have like community support. If I were in a big, building, a fortress of a studio building, like most artists have to be, the shared space element is a great thing because then you have neighbors that are artists that can loan you a color when you need it, or save you a squeegee trip because they've got the thing you need. So I think in any given space there's these things that help protect us, but at the same time you don't want to be vulnerable to the downside of not being in a prison of your room anymore, which I loved, but again, a comfort thing.
Yeah, but you're alluding to your former shop, which was where?
It was in my bedroom, 10 minutes away from where I'm at. It was so wonderful during the pandemic. I grew my business humongously, not only with getting new clients that had nowhere else to go because every other shop was shut down and I was like hugely functional. But the other fun thing was that I was able to experiment a ton. I had a lot of time to do the complex painterly color separations and experiment with halftone and just get a better knowledge base of how those things can be integrated and well figured out from the start. So you don't get these surprising moirés or, funny starts to things that are hard to fix.
I feel like I have talked specifics with, I think, probably mostly Luther about screen printing, who you worked with for a while. I don't know. How long did you
It
work with
was only
Luther?
a year and a half or something. It wasn't literally that long, but we just bonded hard really fast. He's still one of my
Yeah.
people.
He's like he's the chief cheerleader in the sector in Brooklyn, I think.
Agreed. Yep.
Yeah. You are my go-to to talk a little bit more specifics about, because I feel like I watched images of you on your Instagram and stuff about you were using the sun to do some work for you at some point on like a roof or something, your backyard, or I
Oh,
was like, wait, is that possible? How does that work?
it is possible. I don't know that I've done it successfully. I was
Ah,
maybe, oh, you know what? In my backyard, I use that a lot with just having extra space to print kind of messy stuff in. But during the pandemic, I used my backyard to show students how to deal with exposing things with the sun. And some people caught on to it really well, some people didn't. There were only 6 students I was teaching. It was my first year teaching at the college level, Cooper Union. We just streamed and figured it out. But, I had a whole bedroom print shop that I could cheat with. And I was trying to show them how to get up and running on their own in their own spaces. Sometimes I think I maybe encouraged them to use the sun, and it wasn't disastrous, it works.
yeah, theoretically it should work, right?
True, true. But I
Yeah.
was just doing a lot of research around de-evolution, right? Like the ways that we've used technology to our advantage, but it's kind of depreciated the value of how we can come up with our own solutions in other ways. So I think there has to always be that middling effect with new advances in technology. You don't want to forget the structure of the start of how we're able to print things at all, right? It's a stencil at the end of the day. It's not that complicated.
Easy for you to say.
I mean, I have to remind myself of these things because I'll get like overly obsessed with halftone.
Right, right. I do like the idea of sort of restraining yourself and kind of remembering I like that. I'm in. Wait, so you You mentioned moiré, and we've talked about moiré, and it has to do with this halftone that you've also mentioned. And can you just run us through that a little bit? Because I think it's confusing for
I'd
folks.
love to. I'd love to. Thank you for asking, Anne. Wow. So I was mentioning there's three different buckets I will categorize artworks into: graphic, painterly. What's the third one? I forgot already. Graphic, painterly, and indexed. We'll say index is more of a skeletal system of the actual material you're exposing and trying to get onto the screen. For instance, it's a direct representation of a thing that's blocking the other thing. Let's say you put lace in front of a light source, and then you put your screen coated with emulsion on the other side of that. So you'll just get the shadow of the lace onto the screen, and that will be printable as a stencil. Great. Straightforward. Graphic, I would categorize as just whole shapes. They can be just spot colors. They'll always have a little bit of a trapping in between the colors, unless they're directly on top of each other. But that trapping element has to do with how much of space is shared between two pieces that are going to be close together, but not the same color, right? This is one screen. This is another screen. They're not going to be the same color, but they are going to have to be really close and overlap.
So there's no gap.
So there's no gap. Exactly.
Right.
Little white lines in between stuff. If you're a printer, I'm sure you've had that issue with registration. So hard to fix. Just paint it in. At the end of the day, don't stress yourself out with registration. You know, like it sucks either way, but like you can manufacture these things to be easier to print if you know your limitations. So I have a workhorse of a press made perfectly by Royal Jarman and Matt Gomez, ex and friend, you know, two separate people that I forced to work together to make my dreams come true. So I have really great registration abilities. Micro registration means that the screen will stay in one place, while the press bed, which is a vacuum element box, can move independently and shift to places so that it will line up with where you want the screen to land. Fine. That's tricky in its own way, but I under the press for a few years when I worked at K-Rock and figured it out. Carl's also a master tinkerer, mathematician, genius, right? And having printed for him for most of my career, the biggest chunk of it, besides my own business at this point, he was really great at DIY building. And I would receive films, burn them on screens, and print the color he said to. But I didn't understand the layering process of how to get those individual colors separated from the bigger picture. You know, I was building that as a printer, but I wasn't the one doing the Photoshop work ahead of time. So these painterly types of prints have a lot of work to do ahead of time, and that takes usually longer than the actual printing process. I've got a system so that I'll generally have 5 to 10 colors figured out from the start within Photoshop, and then have to make it so I add to that. So the halftone thing is, instead of one solid shape, right, we're using a diffusion process to change that solid shape into a dithering of little dots of color, right? Scattery little mess of sneezy little dots. And these little dots can be processed in 2 different ways, right? There's a third, which is closer to the spot color effect, the graphic thing I was talking about. That's called threshold. Basically, you're gathering the most intense black or white, it's binary version of a thing, right? And processing it. This is all Photoshop, digital. You know, you're not taking actual things and exposing them. You're printing digitally this film. This is going to be released way later, so I don't feel bad showing this, right? This film is blocking light. Everything that's black is blocking light. Everything that's white is clear and will harden the mesh. So the things that are this gray looking in a screen here are actually little dots. They're tiny dots that, instead of making what looks like gray, it's a spaced out version. Oh, this will never focus. Come on, focus. I'll have to just. Anyway, there's amplitude modulated halftone, right? Once we get into splitting frequencies, which are a high whatever threshold of an image, might end up being majority black, minority white, whatever it is, right? You just have on or off in any given image field. This image is a graph in a lot of ways, but if you can process it as an image, then the nature of halftone, right? One continuous tone could apply to sound waves, right? One continuous tone can apply to images in a way that Breaking up a sound wave into frequencies would be a lot of different little noises, right? But breaking up an image into a frequency of dots is relative to lines per inch. So instead of doing this on a wave chart, we're doing this graphically by measuring how many lines per inch are we talking about, getting this one form broken up into a lot of little dots. So if we're talking about 50% black, 50% black or more would be all the way black in a threshold sense. 50% black in a gray area, if you want it to look gray, is actually going to be broken down into half the dots are there, half the dots are not, so that negative space is really what makes it look gray in some ways. And then you apply the color, right? Color is a whole other thing, but getting the halftone figured out, amplitude modulated halftone or AM frequencies rely on that line per inch figuration to be a sized dot, right? That sized dot is fixed in this grid. That graph is going to be, let's say, 2 lines per inch, right? This is 1 inch. We got 4 lines because it's XY axis, right? So that means your negative space, this little open bit, is how big your dot can get on that same line grid. What I do is to figure out, like, okay, my mesh of my halftone is at an angle as well that has to be figured out. But we can figure out the frequency of these line gaps, and we can figure out the angle that we'll be processing them at. So if we're talking about a screen print and we want to avoid a moiré is not ideal. I'll get into that in a little bit. But the ideal is to create something that's a little bit off for our eye to not register. It is a line, right? We're trying to make it into a graphic that's about the bigger picture and not about this little dot that's obvious to me. So anyway, if we have this grid, amplitude modulation relies on this one dot to grow or shrink in this same dot grid system, right? All the dots will be in the same grid. If we're relying on it to be not a moiré, we need to make it so it's not going to conflict with the screen mesh, which is also on a grid.
Right.
So, exactly. If it does have a conflict, as in lines up perfectly-ish, but in a way that conflicts with the dot line, then it'll shatter in a weird way and create a lightning strike, is how I like to describe it. A weird frequency you can see. It's visually strange, but you can't really predict it. You can only avoid it, which I do by using prime number frequencies. They're just less likely to conflict with the other things going on because they're prime numbers, right? They're not going to have a lot of things in common with any other number. But that's amplitude modulated halftone. If we get into the better, less staticky frequency modulated halftone, right? FM radio, AM radio, we're all talking about waves here. Frequency modulation is the same size dot, right? That's the consistent thing. The dot is the same size. The spacing of those dots is scattered, right? So we don't change our amplitude in this one dot sense. We're changing the frequency that one dot will occur. So depending on if it's 50, 60% black, exactly, I know. It just
my head's coming off, Leslie.
I know. But see, then that frequency modulated dot, it's modulating, right? So it goes more and less in its own little weird way. The negative space between dots is also the size of the dot, right? It's not going to gang up on itself to be more dense than it can be. It would just be black. And the negative space dot is also a thing to consider. But the thing is, I have to avoid filling in those negative space gaps. So it will want to fill in no matter what on this screen mesh frequency that's still at a grid, right? If we have a consistent size dot, that's easier for me to manage on painterly whatever prints. But the grid dot being a fixed size, it's easier to know it will pass through without conflict, right? We're not going to have an issue with the moiré, but we will blob out, fill in, maybe not even be visible anymore and turn into a threshold accidentally because those little dots will just gang up together because they're blobbed out because you're printing all bad. So for that, I rely on high frequency mesh, right? 305 lines per inch. There it is. This tattoo.
There it is.
I'm not I just really like that mesh count because you can get a very fine dot on that mesh without having issues of clogging or, well, it dries out, that's for sure. But if you print fast, you don't have that problem.
So two things have occurred to me three things actually. Wow, I have three questions
Oh,
right in a row.
I'm ready. I'm too hot though.
Well, one question and two comments. With the frequency modulation, if it's not in a regular grid system, I'm not sure exactly how you're generating it. I assume Photoshop's doing it for you. But if you were doing it next to somebody else was doing it, won't the patterns be different? There's no way to regulate the scatter.
Oh, there is.
Okay.
I didn't get into that. Sorry. Good question though, because you're bringing up something that I forgot to say, which is that in Photoshop, I have to talk myself through this often because of teaching and having students that are like hovering and like trying to figure out what are you talking about, So I'll go through the steps and say it aloud as I go, so I can do that without doing it. So basically, you go image mode, right? We're changing our mode from grayscale to bitmap. We're making a grid out of this image, and two people would do it exactly the same way because image mode bitmap, and then you're going to adjust your dither is the way you get a frequency modulated halftone. You do dither as an option instead of halftone. Their language is all stupid in Photoshop, but basically adjusting the dither, you can then put in your frequency. So the frequency of the dot at a dither thing is related to the size of the dot. If you're talking about openings per square inch, right, lines per inch, your frequency is still related to LPI, lines per inch. And you can say like, okay, I want this 1 inch broken up into 137 lines. And the opening of the cross section of 137 lines in an inch is going to be your dot size.
Wait a minute. You can, in Photoshop, in any given area, 1 inch or 5-inch square, change the lines per inch. Oh, my heavens.
It's a graph.
I would never.
It's not really like, I'm going to do this to see. It's like, you're going to do this and then you can't undo it,
Okay.
And that's also how you get a lot of pixels, because technically the size dot that occurs from doing this dither process is a square. It's kind of more square and like will chunk up in a weird way to look pixelated in a lot of cases. But the thing I rely on is that the screen doesn't work well for that hard angle at that size. So it does turn it into more of a dot looking thing when it's printed. But the goal is just to have a tiny, tiny threshold of something that would then be printable, as a on or off kind of binary thing that you can regulate.
Okay. First comment. First comment.
Think of it like a Atari or whatever, like old video game graphics, bitmaps. They're using like 8 bits. You know what I mean? Like you're taking a grid into 8 parts, and then instead of, I don't know, it's easier to think of it in a bigger form, but we're talking tiny, tiny, tiny.
Right. No, that makes sense. A little while ago, I had the pleasure of interviewing Jennifer Roberts, who published recently, I don't know if you've read it, Contact, which is her book that's written form of her Mellon lecture she gave at the National Gallery during the pandemic. And she talks about all sorts of things in a very interesting and kind of newly conceptual way for me anyway. And it was really fascinating. But in the book, she talks about the moiré, the interference, the lightning strike thing as all of the printers, including you, speaking about it as a bad thing.
Well, Kate McQuillan uses it to her advantage, but yeah.
That's exactly her point, that maybe we should start rethinking about it. And it brings up a few examples of artists who are using it to, on purpose, which I kind of find fascinating. Just that whole idea that everyone's like, oh, it's a mistake. I'm like, well, maybe not.
Artists love doing things wrong.
Right, exactly.
I mean, printer artists, we're artists in our own way, but if you're trying to do somebody else's work without having these surprises along the way, like probably moirés are bad. But that's the fun thing with more people having access to the medium, is that they can find these surprising things beneficial. What was her name? I like things like that. Jennifer.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you'd like her book. Jennifer Roberts. Yeah, the book's called Contact. You can also, if you are more of an auditory person, listen to her lectures on YouTube.
I will.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it was fascinating. We had a great conversation. And the other thing is, another guest that we had a little while ago was Briar Craig, who is a screen printer in somewhere in BC, Canada, not Vancouver, but into the interior where it's very deserty, hot, not humid. And they use UV ink.
UV ink, yeah, you kind of have to in those
Yeah.
climates.
Well, right. And he was talking about how you can get away with using a much more fine, I suppose is the
Mhm.
term,
Yep.
mesh. And because of this whole idea that the drawing is super fast. And so you have to do it really quickly. I don't know. It was fascinating to me, the difference. And he could get so much more detail in his screen prints than conventional.
I don't know much about UV ink. I used it with Luther at Powerhouse, which was new for me, right? I'm new at different processes, fine, I'll work with it and figure it out. I'm not necessarily going to adapt that into my own shop. Like that's beyond my want. But if a climate is not welcoming to water-based things that dry out so fast, that makes perfect sense. And you can use it to your advantage. Like UV ink is way more glossy than enamel, for instance. It can be more durable in a lot of ways too, but you can build it up to stack on top of itself and get really dimensional type of prints, braille kind of thing, so that it really feels like a different type of mapping. So that's fascinating that somebody would use that. I mean, technology is really vastly advancing, I think, in screen printing because we all have to get stuff onto stuff, right? No matter what. These materials are advancing, but the types of materials we're using then to print with are crazy. You're curing it with light, you're curing ink with a bright light, the same light maybe that's used to expose the screen could be used to cure the ink that goes through the screen. So don't put your wet ink in front of the light, it'll harden it. It reminds me of plastisol because it's like gooey. Once you get it on your hand, I'm kind of messy, right? If I get something on my hand, it'll dry and then I can start using things again. But if it's never going to dry, like you could have just ink everywhere.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, and the thing that they were using to dry the prints was exactly the size of another press. So if you are short on space and also money, because
Mm,
the equipment's expensive, but apparently the ink is prohibitively expensive.
is it?
He said, yeah, and he said he was getting it from somewhere in Paris, I think, for a long time, and they went out of business. So now he's getting English ink.
It can't be much
And
better. I don't know. It's not that closer to me. I don't know.
yeah, I think he convinced the school to invest in the equipment, and off they went. Like that's what they're doing.
Smart.
That's
I mean,
fascinating.
that's neat, but because it's maybe niche, it's not as accessible as like water-based ink technologies that have become a lot more accessible. Like the UV stuff is cool. Like Shepard Fairey uses UV ink for his posters because he really likes the hand done. He hand does a lot, right? You think those graphics could be vectorized or something, but he is really meticulous about the size of cuts he's making on ruby lith, all that. He does a lot by hand, but that makes it so his negative space little spray thing he does too, positive space, whatever, just little dots would just dry out too fast, especially on runs of more than 100. So I would imagine somebody as productive as that would have to have a better system for printing too.
Yeah, you would think. Miranda over on Hello Print Friend interviewed Shepard Fairey recently,
Oh,
and yeah, and I mean, I had never heard Shepard Fairey talk. I
he's
don't know why, but
brilliant.
oh my God, I was so impressed. I was like, holy cow.
I mean, as an artist, he's impressive, but he's also using it for so many good things.
Yeah.
He has such a wide collector base too of people that have known him for a long time, and then new collectors that are just getting into the art world of, prints and all that. So I didn't know his work much before. I mean, duh, known him since college and stuff, but I didn't know him until I got to go to his space and, meet him. I had a show in 2021 at Subliminal Projects. Amazing. But just lending me the space to show all of my stuff, right, in your gallery, like he's just incredibly supportive and big-hearted and to uplift a lot of different printmakers in a lot of spaces too. So we need more people like that. He's the West Coast Luther. But he's like masterful at being able to be not snobby about his success, right? He's not like a big-headed artist. He's a very like humble man.
Yeah, he's kind of sits in the sweet spot. He hits the fine art part, but he hits the graphic sticker on the street part, and it's accessible, as you said, by so many varying kind of people who approach it from different angles.
You just have to be smart at business, honestly. Like it's weird to be good at both. It's like
Yeah,
Very unusual. It's like,
I think you're right. Yeah, I think so too. All right, so we've talked about mesh. Such a crazy
what
thing.
else you need
Oh,
a mesh for printing on weird stuff? Fabric, I've been doing a lot of one-offs lately. That's another bucket. We got graphic, painterly, index, one-offs, right? Could it be any combination of those? But as a process set up for the things I've been doing for people, I've been trying to go through like, but what have I done over the last few years? I could talk about with you, but I'm seeing these categories and realizing that each one is a little ladder onto the next. It really helps with growing my process. And one-offs is kind of the next biggest, hardest thing to do.
all right, tell us about one, a recent one.
Ooh, oh my God. Some big architecture company, literally called Big, asked me, they didn't ask me, they asked a friend and then they pointed them to me. Probably this won't happen also, but I was asked to print this dedication on a building. It's on glass, right? To screen print onto glass. They accidentally installed it too soon. They should have done their whatever flatbed printing before they installed it, but the designers and the builders miscommunicated. And they're like, "We already installed it; it's done." And they're like, "You forgot the dedication." Oh no, who can print on glass last minute? I'm like, I can, but they'll figure out a different way. I had to go through a lot of my like, I can do this. Okay, yeah, here's what I've done in the past. They don't know anything about printing, but it would be with enamel onto glass, right? And basically, you have to flood the screen first. You put ink in the mesh and then put that whole screen onto the wall and then pull it again so that you're just forcing what's already in the mesh onto the surface instead of getting through the mesh. The chances of messing up are higher if you don't just flood it first. So I didn't explain all that, but I was like, I could do it. Mentally, I'm thinking like, this is how I would do it. But it's like 36 inches wide. It says like, the Police Department of the Bronx, dedicated by Eric Adams or something. There's like New York City logos everywhere. I'm like, this is official. I can help police. Do I get assistants that are police assistants? Don't use your guns, but like maybe use your tasers for something.
I feel like I've seen, I suppose they're TikToks that have migrated over to YouTube, Instagram, of people doing the squeegeeing onto a new coffee shop or something. And then they're like,
how impressive is it though?
It's incredible. And then there's some gold leaf going on. I'm like, what?
It's beautiful. Yeah. I'm like, I want to do that. This is high stakes. Like, I'm going to do it. If it gets weird, wipe it off, try again. It's enamel, but if you hit it fast, you're good. So you always have to think of little troubleshoot ways to fix things, which relatively speaking, high stakes, it's on a building, it's there forever. They could use a really durable type of vinyl, I'm sure, but I'm not going to tell them that. Give me money.
Right.
But the other types of like one-off printing I've been doing, one that's super consistent is with Selena Kimball. She has a studio in Gowanus, and she built out her studio to be a printing facility, so she does a lot of collages, which doesn't take up a huge square footage of space. She's also a teacher at Parsons. She's not a teacher. She's like the director of painting or something. She's like the head of everyone in painting or something. She's like very important. So she's a really phenomenal person to speak with frequently about art in general, but her practice is amazing. She makes all these small enough, big, small. I don't know what her original size is, but they can be scanned and then enlarged so that she'll take these massive screens that are like, I think they're 60 by 84 or something. They're really big and wide, ordered specialty, and 230 mesh on those things means they're very delicate and huge and heavy. I'm like, let's bring in two assistants. I'll be the main guy, but like, give me some help. So this is something we started doing at Powerhouse. I was new and troubleshooting with her about getting the right halftone to work with her collage work. But then it was really hard, right? And Luther is not cheap. So when you have like 5 printmakers dealing with your work and it doesn't go well, you're like, oh my God, I maybe can't do this, right? So she's kind of panicking years ago and was like, I'm going to just build my own shop. Like, Leslie, you're independent.
Oh, wow.
You want to come help me? You're like, yes, so I will go to her. She gets her screens made with Luther still. There's no hate in between any of this because it could easily turn into like, don't take my client, but it's not like that in print world for us. So it's kind of like who's set up to do the job with the fewest amount of tears. So I don't cry a lot with Selena. Sometimes it's painful, but it's never unsatisfying. We do a really great job every time. So yeah, we have CMYK, 4 screens set up, and all of our stuff is pretty massive. It's like 4 feet by 6 feet is the kind of size of the actual prints we're getting out of it at the end of the day. And we've been doing it on linen, on, you get like 3 prints, 3 CMYK prints means 4 pulls in a day. And there's a big table set up. We just lay everything out, tape it down, and just kind of go through that boom, boom, boom system. It's the same every time, but I can't do it on my own. So Selena will be in the middle on the screen, pulling it like Luther, right? You on all fours, you're on two knees, right? Your hands are on the squeegee. I'm on one side, and then there's an assistant from Parsons, right? She recruits some interns to help her. And we just pull ourselves along, we do it in a little line, and we have a little checks and balances system where every time we go through a dry run and do a test of the pull and then jump up, do it again. So we can assess how it went, how it looks after the fact is another circus, because it's water-based ink. You print it, you got to get it off, then you got to get it out of the screen and protect that. So she's reusing the same 4 screens over and over, but each session will just be one artwork. And a lot of the time it's a diptych. So we'll do like 2 sessions in a month and then deal with the next piece later, So when she was having a show, we had to do this frequently. And now it's kind of whenever she has a piece finished that's ready, we'll do it again. But whatever, it's beautiful every time. I don't know what it's going to be until the K is done. It's hard to tell, like, which way's up? Where's the helicopter? She like throws in these little things every time. But I think she's brilliant at composition. And we finally figured out the right halftone process, right? It's a dither. Luther uses a different system to output his dots, right? Not necessarily through Photoshop, but you can use a grayscale image and throw it through a lot of different systems to get that line per inch frequency figured out. So she's dealing with microns. Micron is a fraction of an inch system. So it's the equivalent of like 0.1 blah, blah, blah of an inch. So if you're talking about like 5 micron size dots, that's teensy weensy.
Oh my gosh.
It's the size that works for her collage work that doesn't, dithers don't moiré, right? We don't have that issue with clashing on mesh angles, but they will gang up when they have very small negative space. So you have to really get used to the material you're printing on and know about the squeegee angle, how you can adjust yourself to do a better print. It's not just me printing though, so I have to tell that to the other people when I see an issue and can feel what the answer needs to be, but it's not just me anymore. It's not just me yoinking on these. Those one-offs are fantastic. They're very satisfying.
Wait, but I'm confused. If she's got 4 screens for the CM, Y, and K, mm-hmm. and they're one-offs, what's the shift? How are they one-offs if
there's one panel we're printing on at a time. So she'll cut one of them up, right? We print 3 technically, but because we're not set up to have the screen in a stationary place, the actual material is in the stationary place. Fabric you have to leave alone, right? If you got a t-shirt press, you can on off the t-shirt, but you have to have a carousel of screens that are going to be laying down onto the actual stationary material. So if you take that and scale it up to this 4 foot by 6 foot size, then you have to tape down your linen and then interchange the screens that go on it. As you're interchanging the screens, right? Print one, scrape the ink off, put it in the sink and rinse it. Then you blow dry the print you just made to then be ready for the next screen to go on. So I still count those as one-offs, even though the process lends us to be doing 3 in a day.
Okay. All right.
One of them will be on a panel lately. 2 of them are on linen that can then be collaged again. She does extra work to these things sometimes.
And is the end result something that not mimics a painting, but is considered in her world to be a painting that happens to have some screen printed elements?
I think most artists I work with on one-offs just call them paintings.
Yeah.
Technically, I say print, but I'm not going to correct them, right? It's their work.
Oh, no.
But I think that the nature of a collage being screen printed kind of puts it through a different print system from its original and kind of speaks to the chaos that you can have a system around to then make it like into a finished individual unique painting kind of thing.
Right.
But that's that. Selena's amazing. My stuff, Selena helped me. She did a few visits with me about my own work because I had a solo show in Omaha, Nebraska in February. Strange. I don't make a lot of my own stuff. So it was a hurdle for me to think of, what the fuck am I going to print? Do I have to print? Can I draw? I miss drawing. But if you're out of practice, right, that all feels phony to try to pick up just for this one occasion, so sure, I tried to sketch something, but that's more of a way of getting my brain onto paper. It's not really a finished product. So I don't have the patience to really deal with more than just thoughts anyway. I need to take more time to reset, relax, wake up and feel more refreshed. I've been doing that lately. But that's only because I hit a wall trying to come up with this show in February, right? So I made a bunch of one-offs, right? Prints, I'm still calling them, on 30 by 40 panels. They were on flat canvas, but the process I did was this indexing process, right? So I took a material and exposed it and then just printed that. So technically quick to make, but not, because you have to know a lot about what a screen can handle, especially when you're printing it on something that's not totally flat. Canvas has a lot of ridges in it. So I had to use I think I used 230 mesh to get the actual printing, 305 on some. But getting the surface you're printing on super duper smooth is sometimes impossible. So I sealed it beyond its already gessoed surface with another print, open mesh 195. I was like, let me just smooth it out again. And so through doing that, I got a surface that's good enough to then pick up the material edges of what I was trying to print. So a lot of what I speak to, even in college, even before that, it's about finding the edge of something and letting that define what the interior will be. And same thing with baby hair, right? You got a little sass. But I think that everything has sass. My friend who's a photographer, Charity, was in my space recently photographing me with a film camera, right? We did a trade, right? She's staying in my room, but I'm like, I need shots of me in my space. Will you come take pictures? And so we played dress up. She gave me this necklace too. But part of our trade was that okay, you're taking pictures. She's a photographer. She's obsessed. She did a great job, but personally, I don't sit still well. A lot of the pictures, my eyes are just dead because she took a while to focus, which is important. I had my hair big at the time, so she was really singling out hairs to be focal points, because she was like, if you get the hair in focus, then everything will be crystal clear. And I'm like, that makes perfect sense to me. I totally get that edge thing, because finding clarity on those little tiny details really helps the full thing to come to life. So my one-offs are of clothing that I used to wear that were part of my identity, especially before I was a solid, I don't know, college, you're just not done yet, right? Omaha, when I lived there before moving here, I was a whole person, yes, but I was ragtag, had a lot of thrifted clothes, people gave me things, all these things I still have, but for sentimental value, they're not quite wearable anymore. So the prints I made for the show in Omaha, right, I was brought back for this, was of some garments that I identify with but cannot wear. And so moving my print shop from my bedroom to this space uncovered these little extra things that I want and don't want at the same time. So instead of throwing them out, I kind of raised them up to this platform of being artful without having the actual pieces on display. The actual garments could be burned and I wouldn't care anymore. But I do have the index, the archive of their memory alive in this shadow effect print painting that I named after my friends. So there was that helps me feel like a full person, right? Because I kind of lost it for a bit when I moved. I'm like, I don't know where I am anymore. But the other part I put into it were one-offs of I have that here. It's a phone book from my childhood, the house I grew up in. It's got whatever. We had this phone book near the phone for the whole time, right? From 1989, 90 until my dad moved out in 2009 or something. But my mom took a phone book that was in the tummy drawer of this cabinet. It's one of those things you forget about. It's just where's the phone book? Everyone has all these numbers in their like digital phones now, but before it was all dial up. You got Granny's number, you got Emily's number, you got everybody's in there. And it helped my mom keep track of us, right? When we scattered in the neighborhood. But I found this and took it, right? I moved my mom from Kansas City to North Carolina, found some things she didn't want anymore, took that book, scanned it, and made that into a piece in the show also, because that speaks to another part of my identity, is just kind of the satellite people that help me understand who I am too. So that home ownership aspect of like my parents were around my age when they got the house, like I'm not there. I'm not going to be there. And I have to find different ways to feel whole without having a place to store things, right? We do things differently now, and that's okay. Their parents didn't do it the same way either, necessarily. But I feel like it's important to be responsive and resonant about those things from our past, but to understand there's a different way to feel holistic about keeping these things in different forms, elevating them.
Well, yeah, no, I think that's I like it. I have often seen or read, looking at people's work, this idea of the archive of the memory, and I'm like, what the hell? The way you described it was really good. Thanks.
Okay. Rose Celine is an artist I was going to mention who does amazing artist. She was in the Whitney Biennial last session. I helped her make a big one-off piece. The thing is, it's all text, right? A lot of her work is text-based. She's an archivist. She's an artist. She's had an Art 21 about her practice. And it's a lot of just small things that are unnoticeable, especially that make portraits in New York City, just like things that are left behind. So she had this project that was all a lot of descriptions of coins that were used in buses between like 2017, 2018. And they are markers of people who got onto the bus system without using actual money, right? It's stuff that's the same weight as a quarter, but maybe not. So she took all these objects that the MTA collected. They can't just throw stuff away. And so she bought it, and she had this like big job to sort them out, and found like 5 categories of different objects. They're different, like one of them's luck based, like coins from Chuck E. Cheese, stuff that's like religious tokens, just lots of different weights of, metal hardware that like contractors use. So these little things were categorized. I did or I guess it was an edition of like 3 of like a portrait of some of those, but the descriptions were all on these long scrolls that were on the wall in front of the actual piles that she sorted. And it was a really beautiful piece, but it was hugely difficult to print. Oh my God. Oh my God. But we've been doing difficult prints together since 2018. Mostly it's text-based, but sometimes they'll be serifs. Sometimes they'll just be on a weird material. Like,
wait, if she's doing letter forms like that, why wouldn't she go to a letterpress person? Okay, all right.
I think there's something that speaks to the directness of screen printing that's like, letterpress is better to do not one-offs for, right? You do a setup and then you...
Yes, of course.
But her stuff is usually on boards that then they get framed, so it'll be a description of the object that she's wanting to archive. And the printing part, I think, is better to be direct than digitally printed, because it speaks to the flawed nature of having this collection in the first place. But
sure. And screen printing the benefit being that you can print onto a slab of wood or something, and you can't with letterpress.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could.
This is super duper archival, but
yeah,
the thing at the Whitney, it took like 5 screens per each. There's like 5 different descriptions, 5 different screens per descriptor. It's like 25 different screens to make this like one-off installation.
Oh my gosh!
But each one-off print needed to then also be perfect, or you would ruin the previous print of. So we went through a lot of paper, but
that's almost like a suicide.
It was fine. Yeah, it felt like it.
This is a little tangent, but back in the 90s, when you were probably not even born, I worked at the National...
Go on.
I worked at the National Gallery, and it's like a small city. It has its own cobblers. It has its own locksmiths. It has, it's insane. But the exhibition team there screen prints the labels for all of those shows directly on the wall.
Yes. Why?
Right. Because the guy who was the head of exhibition design when I was there, who was difficult, he was very demanding, but he was brilliant. One of those. His name was Gil Ravenel, and he wanted there to be nothing to distract you from the word. Like, he didn't want there to be a piece of cardboard on the wall. He wanted it to be seamless. And so everything, the big panels, the little, everything was screened, unless there was some issue with the wall. It was all screen printed. So if you came back to them and said, there's a typo, I'm really, really sorry, they'd have to go in and paint the whole stupid thing over and rerun the screen. And yeah. Whereas at the Whitney and other places that I've worked, the Whitney was it was like letter set. And you would scritchy scratch it, the whole text onto the wall. So there was also no seam, different kind of, like vinyl. And at the Baltimore Museum, we printed on, and they glued it down to mat board and cut it. And, it was like a piece of paper on the wall. So like very different approaches. Does it matter? I don't know. But yeah.
I mean, durability matters. It depends on how long something's going to be up. If something's in the sun, also, it might have an issue with longevity. Being able to get it off is sometimes a problem if it doesn't need to be permanent. Temporary, pastings are important. But it's just every time you screen print on the wall, sure, there's a typo, paint over it. You have to buff it also you have to scrape all that down to be flat again. So that's a process, which is a dying art form. I appreciate doing that. I did that for Nisa Chow at the Versace Gallery, the Columbia University Gallery. A few years ago, she had an installation that was about memories it's called Trace. And it was people who had passed away during the pandemic that were early essential workers. So their loved ones gave a little sentence about each person, and part of the printing needed to disappear. So she had tried some stencils, and at the not last minute, after that failed, right? And the show's coming up, they're like, we need someone to screen print this. Leslie, can you print with heat sensitive ink, right? So if you touch it, it turned out great. We printed it really well. If you touch this text, it would appear with heat, and then you could read through if you touch through the whole thing. But if you're
what? Wait a minute.
Yeah.
You had to interact with it and give it heat to reveal the text.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Otherwise, it looks like a blank wall. So it really speaks
to
the
so cool
permanence of these very important individuals. Like, you have to have proximity with the actual text to make it visible. So it was a really brilliant project. Super hard to do. I'm like, I don't know if I can print this. Like, what's your particle size on this weird thermo ink I don't know about, So did some tests, figured it out, and printed it well. But it's really worth it at the end of the day when people have projects that are poetic enough to need that type of care. Because I'm not going to say no just because it's a police department, right? Because I'm printing Eric Adams' name, who I don't necessarily care for. But I'm not. But I'm just saying, at the end of the day, if they need it done, I'll do it, right? But money is an object. We have to value our time to make materials and this kind of stuff possible. But, printing on walls is such a dying art form that when people need it done, I like to try. It's just such an odd request nowadays.
Yeah, I guess it is. I'm still on the conceptual rigor and circle that is occurring with the fact that you had to lay your hands on the wall to engage.
The print was
fascinating.
The ink was visible when it's printed, but it would cool down or something. It's similar to the wall color. If you're walking by it, you wouldn't notice. But once it's dry, it goes all the way invisible. And so, I don't know. It was tricky, but we did it. But it was a few years ago, so I forget what was hard about it.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Nisa Chow.
Wow.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Somebody's going to get an idea about some further use of that.
I think sharing process is really important, because so many artists will share what they're up to with me. I'll ask, why do you want to do it like this? What are you talking about? Why do you want to print on leather? Tiana Nikita McLeodin is someone I was connected with at 52 Walker. Doing all the prints with every show is not necessary. I don't necessarily do that. Each artist gets the opportunity to make it an edition. Some people make an album, some people make a book, right? But I am offered as a screen printer to work with everyone and anyone on whatever they want. So, and it's generally supposed to be affordable, right? This is the collection that can be shared with the artist friends and people who are new to collecting art and want to have something from the show, a keepsake. So it's a neat thing to be able to be on that level, to provide that service to just galleries, artists, just as a part of their archive in a moment. It's kind of like when you're an artist and you have a book made. Maybe you need a poster to go with that book because the book is expensive to make. So when I worked with Rose Celine, her publisher for her book was American Art Catalogs. And they have since commissioned me to print a few other things since then. But it's not a poster, right? These are fine art pieces. They're unique also. Each one being numbered and signed by the artist makes it at a different level than something that's just more mass produced. But I think that the level of 52 Walker is really conceptually heavy. So Tiana, Nikita McLeodin, I worked with there, and she came to me to print work for her show during the Guggenheim's Going Dark show. She was invited to be a part of that. Amazing. Well deserved. Wow, the whole thing was spectacular. But she and I did a lot of tests to figure out the process for these prints on leather she was wanting to do. And part of it was to be obscured, right? It's black on black printing, which is what we did for her edition at 52 Walker. But that was textured. So you could really feel the text. And we put a skim of 3M, which was reflective. So that brought it to the surface even more. Gromit, she's fucking hardcore. Tiana, Nikita McLeodin, amazing. But every time she comes over to do a project or talk about something, she'll enlighten me about all these things. She works with institutions. She's represented by white columns now. Like, she's been blowing up for a minute and doing it so gracefully. Maybe there are some discomforts with that expansion. I'm sure that there are, as every stage in life has its own hurdles to get through. But I really appreciate when artists can sit down with me and discuss what they're trying to get through so that the conceptual whole is there, right? We have to have this core value system that's going to need to be printed for this reason. Because, of course, there's a lot of other ways to do it. And I'm not going to be selfish or snobby or pushy about needing this to be screen printed unless it should be, right? Unless it should be screen printed. You know, there might be a cheaper, easier way to get the job done, but I might insist on it because maybe I can do it better.
I have no doubt you can. I'm a little curious about the economics of the 52 Walker gift edition plan. They are paying for that for the artist?
Yep. Each show comes with a book, right? It's a book that's got info about the artist, a couple writings by different people that are, you know, doing statements for the actual show, documentation of the show. It's all related to their individual show that they're doing. And it comes out way later because they have to document the whole thing and then have the book made.
Right. But that's invaluable. What a gift to the artist.
Oh, yeah. Publishers need to front the money to then make it back on the back end because they're maybe good at sales. They have all these collectors they already know. 52 Walker will frame everything too. And then their prints are $2,000. You know, I think that includes the frame. So, and each one they try to keep at that $2,000 mark. It's an edition of like 30, right? The Arthur Jaffa print is 50, but it's like a 12 color, which is few for what I normally do for them. Some 20s, 25, 27 colors, like it just gets up there. But it's about accessibility, right? I'm the production machine. I can spit out these things to be affordable without too much stress. But I was looking recently, trying to go over all my notes into what is the function of an institution and how do I qualify as an institution? I am one individual, right? I can work and churn out a lot of different artists' stuff. Generally, it'll be like one new thing a week almost, you know? So if that turns into 52 editions in a year, that's pretty impressive, right? But I'm like, I don't see that. I see a lot of halftone dots, right? Because I'm looking that closely at everything. But step back and maybe look up, what does institution mean? You know, an institution is a foundation. It's a system that has these structures, elements in it. And a lot of it has to do with a systematic way of being in production of something, right? So when I have Claudia here, my assistant, wonderful, super great, helpful person, was referred to me by Alexander Harrison, you know, is familiar with her through school. So everybody's connections are always going to be helpful. I try to tell my students that like your best resource is each other, right? Make friends. So Claudia and I worked together for the last year and a half, year or so. And I forget I have so many rules. You can't put tape down in my snack zone. You can't have liquids on this table. You can't like put things back in the wrong spot because when I go to scoop my emulsion back, I'll have no spatula where it's supposed to. So it's like these small things I regulate in my own brain, and that sense of foundational security within my business on my own personal load bearing capacity is heavy, right? I'm a very strong business person. I see that production wise, I can do it. When it comes to keeping the books, right? Doing all this back end work after the fact, like that's where I drop the ball sometimes, but it's fixable because it's all recorded in some way on an invoice or through an email document, So it's more about being able to churn things out properly. The fact of having an institution mindset makes it so that I will want to stay small just as a project protection zone. I don't want to work with anybody who comes to me off Google. That's icky to me because you don't get that individuality. I don't want you to push a button and know exactly what the price is because it might change. The cost of paper goes up. Maybe your budget says this and that, so I'll source a different one for you. Or maybe I have this extra in stock and you wouldn't even know about. But yeah, I think being your own institution is important. Just to live by your own standards is all that means. And by foundation, I looked that up too. It's about the base, right? Again, load bearing capacity to then fulfill a bigger need to a community, right? And I'm so proud to have thousands of prints in thousands of homes all over the world. That's crazy. That's crazy what's been touched. I've touched every piece of paper several times. Maybe I'll cut off my little fingerprints, but it's most of the time hand cut, each 4 sides of a thing, deckled, whatever it is. I don't have a big paper stack cutter. I have a rotary type, that's a self-sharpening. But it makes it so that my systems are made to be small and made to be impactful on a different level than needing to do marketing, for instance. I don't want to do that. However, now that I'm in this new space, I'm like, dude, this rent is tripled. I could do it before. Now I'm like 3 or 4 times as much money I need to make every month. So I'm like, let me go through my systems and see what I can afford to do better or more of, or maybe include other people to help me in different ways. So there's a couple cool neighbor kids. One of them does business cards, right? Mateo, he's not that young. He's like in his 20s, but he's a great designer. I'm like, I like making business cards for people. I want to do it affordably. So this isn't going to be a big money maker, but I do want to provide a resource to people so that they can do their own businesses and then maybe send me jobs that I actually want to do. And everyone having business cards is a good thing. Whether we function digitally online most of the time or not, I really like being able to uplift people in their state and not forcing them to all be artists and creatives. So Mateo would do design work and I would just have an easier time printing stuff if I don't also have to design it. Another guy who lives down the street is like 18, he's big on drawing, but he's completely moldable as far as being introduced to the art world in a lot of ways. So I'm like, you want to come here and just sit on the couch and sketch? Like, go for it. I'm busy, but like, if you want to be immersed in this, like, you are welcome. Not everyone is going to be able to do that. Other ways I've been trying to include teens is by making teens do zines. Zine. So I want to introduce a grant to get something to get kids to do that without me being terribly involved. None of this is making money, by the way. I think I have to just be more efficient with like one-offs coming in. Just up your prices. That's not hard.
Wait, get David Swerner to pay you a little more.
Exactly. Thank you. Or, I don't like having to rely on one institution to be my bread and butter because if they drop the ball, which it has happened, then I'm fucked. And I don't have anything. So it's great to have a lot of different institutions to go to and continuously be doing benefit editions for Art Space is connected with the Independent Fair, Printed Matters editions. I've done quite a few over the years. A Lakey Shilling is one of my favorites. It's on the wall back there. But again, they scatter in between being graphic and being painterly, and those things take up different amounts of time to produce. I am adamant about making sure everyone has just trust in my system. So if that means making a proof first, so that then you're excited, a proof is just make one, and then you have a good to go bon entier, version of it. And I'll always make it a little better the second time around. So it's just nice to have support from people who want you to succeed instead of like, hey, you're late at this. How come you're not done yet? Like, just add stress to your already stressful job.
Are you friends with Sarah Gates at Kingsland Editions?
Sarah, yeah. I don't see her ever. Every printer is in their own shop, but yeah, I know her well.
Of course. Yeah, she obviously is in love with doing the wonderful editions she does with her artists. But I think the foundation monetarily is that she makes swag for the Whitney.
Yeah.
For their shop, which I know is like, you don't want to make tote bags probably. And I'm sure she would, I mean, I'm not going to speak for Sarah, but I think, I don't know, that seemed like a pretty good model to.
If I were to do something like that, it would be doing prints on location with people. If the school system wanted to pass me around, maybe have a print day at every school over the course of the year, I would do that once a week. That sounds really fun. I've done that in the past, different charter schools. I brought a screen in. Actually, a friend of mine, Messi, let me come into his classroom and we did 2 sessions, one of which was just doing drawings. And then the next day I brought their drawings on the screens. And so we just printed stuff that they made. But now I have, because I did a job or an event, actually this was through Black Mass Publishing at MoMA. They were invited to do a day of workshops and Black Mass invited me. One of the founders of Black Mass Publishing is Yusuf Hassan. And he did a benefit edition for Printed Matter. And so that's how we got connected, is because I printed his work a while ago. But then he's like, you're fun. Let's do a workshop. I'm like, great. That sounds really neat. So we did it. And the money I got through doing the workshop, zeroed out to nothing because I really wanted to get a mobile exposure unit.
Oh.
It's not that mobile. It's still a little box, right? But it's useful in being able to take on location and take those drawings and just do them on the spot. So now I'm able to do the full process with people in real life. And that's what I would love to make my bread and butter, because then you're just sharing your resources with getting people involved with making this stuff. They could keep the screen at the end of the day if they paid me for it. But it's just neat to share the process with people instead of relying on like inventory, inventory in, inventory out. Prints get damaged, like if there's just stuff hanging out, like I don't want it. Let's share our knowledge, right? Pay me to do that.
I agree. And you are perfect for it. Yeah, I find you a joy to talk to. And it reminds me of my long-held belief that I refuse to work with assholes.
Ooh, yes. Smart. That's a great idea.
If when I was running the Baltimore Museum's print fair, it was invitation. Like, and people would call and say, well, how do I get in? I'm like, well, you have to be nice to me.
Please, may I get in?
Well, and you have to have good stuff to sell, right? Like, your quality has to be up there.
Should. But I mean, some people make bad quality stuff and sell a lot of it. It doesn't have to be.
That's true.
But then again, it's the fair, right? We're not going to have a bunch of nobodies in at the fair.
Well, and for the BMA, my unwritten rule that I'm not sure was handed down to me from the person who was running it before me, but I felt pretty strongly that if you were invited to the show at the fair or sell at the fair, that you had to have something in your inventory that I wanted for the museum's collection.
Oh,
like not that I would actually buy it, but that there had to be something.
That you found interesting, at least.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Because all the processes too. If somebody's doing something that's like, what? This is a litho, and it's intentional or something, that would really make an interesting showcase too, because you would automatically be generating interest if you know all the processes, and then it's like, well, this is actually stunning,
Yeah. And so the print fair that I do now is not connected to the museum, and so my standards are lesser in that sense, but I still want to think that you're going to be fun to hang around with.
Yeah.
and have a drink with,
Yeah.
and that you have really good product.
I mean, if people are not good talkers, like probably they're bad salespeople too. At the end of the day, like you're doing them a favor by not allowing them to embarrass themselves. Like, is that fucked up?
Yeah. Yeah. A long time ago, I won't embarrass him by telling you who it was, but I walked up to this guy at a fair and I was like, "Are you going to stand up and talk to me? Like, you have no idea who I am."
Oh, this is while you're at a fair and he's just ignoring you while you're like, I'm an interested maybe collect.
He's on his phone, right? And I was like, I'm actually interested in buying this for a museum.
Yeah, yeah. They scout at stuff like that. That's part of the reason why being in real life is important, you know? No, it's fun to go out in real life. I wish I could have more to be at the level of being indoors, right? Art fairs indoors. I just did a couple street fairs, mini black zine fair.
Oh, right, right.
And yeah, and I try to meet people where they're at, you know? So if it's like, okay, I'm not going to sell a $50 print. Actually, I did, right? The periodic table of Black revolutionaries, I made $50 for these, but normally on my website, less money for me to whatever. Point of the story is zines, easily collectible, easily mailable, right? Your material is way cheaper. It has to be text weight paper. I'm also forcing everyone to be in the same 8x5 format, which unfolds to be 16x20, which is an easy frame size, you know? So all these little things will encourage younger people to maybe think differently about, like, I don't know. It's not really about them to think about the format. It's more about the versatility of being able to have something and keep it nice, you know?
Right.
If you're moving a lot, if you've got a dorm room, if you can't afford a frame, you know, it's the prefab frame size. That's great. It's also a book, so you don't have to have it as that. You can also have these things be just stationary, right? They could just be their own little star. This one is different. But the one I'm really excited about, I'll do a small PSA for. I'm perfect. Life's perfect. I love being me. Can you see
Aw.
that?
Yeah.
It's a font created by Kai Generet, who is a student of mine during the pandemic.
Aw.
2020. Yeah, he did the whole light exposure thing with the sun, and he did a great job because he made his artwork very simple, you know? He's really good at forming his own creativity around the restraints of the material. So Kai is great, and that's why I wanted to invite him to do an edition with me. He's young, right? That doesn't mean he's not talented. I just wanted to support someone who's newly graduated and deserves a leg up. A lot of the other people I publish in the zine realm it's either collaborative, right? Painters, writers, people who don't necessarily paint, doing things, writers, you know. So doing zines, I think, is really helpful to bring a lot of ideas into one document. And it doesn't have to be at a lower level. It is cheaper to make, you know, and I can make a lot of them for a lot less. But I prefer to pay people up front for this. So each artist I do a zine with, I'll give them $200 or $300. I forget. It's gone up since I started doing it, but it's still accessible for me to give these away when I want to. So I can have visitors come in and then they're like, my kid would love your work. And I'm like, here's a little version of it, you know? But just
Nice.
stuff that makes you think, I think is really neat. So he came and we did some tests about different metallic inks. This is aluminum pigment. So it's like metal-ish.
Yeah, that's cool.
The registration is so hard. So this being about perfection is so nice. I print these on my AutoPress now because Luther gave it to me and I got it to work. But it's efficient in a lot of ways. And
Nice.
I encourage that when possible. The flip side of it, doing fine art printing, right? Not efficient. It's hard. It's hard. And you have to keep adding things to it to make it look right and feel like the original does, to have the same magical qualities. But sometimes with pieces, I'll add a little special thing and not really ask the artist because they should trust me, I hope, by now. But like, let's say it needs a little metallic. I'm going to put it in there and you're going to like it. Probably I'll show you that in the proof, right? But maybe I'll just say, like, this could be better if we did this, you know, and then they'll be like, wow, like 10 out of 10 times everyone loves my surprises. But I would hate to do something someone would not like at the end of the day.
Well, an artist who would be uncomfortable with that kind of improvisation probably isn't interested in collaborative printing.
There you go. Hit the print
Right?
button. Go to Staples or something. I'm not that guy.
And like to control, control freak.
Control freaks, I can't. You can't handle mean people. I can't handle control freaks. When people need constant updates about how their project is going, I'm like, I haven't gotten to it yet. I'm doing lots of other things, and I give myself a month to finish something because it takes a week to do, but it takes a lot of other weeks to do the Photoshop stuff, to gather paper, and then have enough film and cartridge. All these things I have to go out and get them half the time. Not everything could be shipped here, but it's mostly just because I'm crazy about paper handling. Don't ding it before I get it. God damn it.
Right. I feel like at some point you told me about carrying some giant tube across the burrows. What was that story?
I went to Talus. I go to Talus often, right? Yay for Talus, Raising the Roof are my favorite distributors. There's a warehouse of stuff you could order directly from. And I think Luther, bigger shops that have places to store huge amounts of paper can do that. I have some storage, but I generally have to go get more paper with every new job. So I'll do an order every few weeks and generally pick it up. But I'll go to Talus, either take the bus and a train to get there from here. It's kind of hard. It takes like 45 minutes, and then get a car for the way back with the things, But sometimes it's a huge amount of paper. So a couple of times I've had to get a U-Haul. And nowadays I'll just have them cut it, right? Like, you guys do the $5 extra worth of cutting I need to make this handleable for me to get it in a car. But the other day, a month ago or so, I got a big tube with something in it. I forget what. Maybe it was samples for the show I had. But I walked it back, right? If it's small enough to hold, I'll like put something on a shoulder and put the other thing under my arm and just hoof it for like an hour to get here. But it seems uncomfortable and it's not a good idea. But if you also don't have a bunch of money to pay for a $70 car, sometimes if you go at rush hour and it's raining and you need a big car, right? Then it's like, I'd rather walk. So I was like going all the way from one corner of Brooklyn to the other. And I was crossing Bushwick Avenue with all this stuff, right? I can see one direction and not the other. So I rely on the crosswalk. And the crosswalk said go, but it's Bushwick Avenue. So there's all kinds of people breaking the law. And I don't, sometimes your periphery will be a lot more quick to see things before you can actually do anything about it. So I was like taking a step and I saw headlights, right? I saw headlights coming and I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, I can't see what's coming because there's this obstacle in my way. And a car just skirted right. Like, my tube was over their car, right? Because they got that close to me as they almost hit me. And I'm like, I'm a huge person with all this stuff on me. Like, you can't not see there's a person in the street. I am using the crosswalk and, you can't like stop and throw something at them or like scream a bunch of profanities because it's like, what is that going to do? They just get stopped at the next light. Like, why is everyone in a dumb hurry,
I shouldn't laugh, but it's sort of a comical scene in my brain.
It was funny. It was funny after the fact. Laugh about
Yeah, right, exactly. One of those.
Not funny, but like that time, near misses are good.
So what's coming up next?
Oh, upcoming?
Yeah.
Oh, next. People have asked me to do stuff for like political things.
Oh, okay.
Right? There's like the election in the fall. So there's like printing to be done in the late summer, which is like kind of soon.
Yeah, it is. It's tomorrow.
I shouldn't say what it is. I also don't know that it's happening. Like a lot of things like fall through at the last minute. The artist doesn't want to do it anymore. And it's like, didn't you read the artwork by now? Like, that's a problem for you. I'm chill, but like, So yeah, I hope to be collaborating with a couple organizations on some benefit editions.
Oh, great.
And, it's always good to circle back with people I've done benefit editions with just to see, like, you guys good for this year? You're planning anything? Like, don't forget about old Leslie. I don't do that often enough just to revisit places and to check in, just to say, like, I'll take your business if you have any. I should be doing more one-offs with Simon Benjamin soon. He's been doing these really amazing diver portraits. He's a painter. He uses all these different symbolisms within what he's working with. But I really like working with people that have just a consistent practice, because it's one-offs, right? But the more we do the same thing, the better I get at it and the more comfortable we get at working together. So it was really hard to work with him the last time, but this time I feel more confident that it'll go more smoothly. I try not to be scared of people that have difficult ideas, and just to say like, hey, maybe this 20 color 22 by 30 size edition of 150 could be printed in CMYK instead of 20 colors, like maybe just introduce that and say, we can add gloss to a thing. We can add metallic to an area, gold foiling stuff. There's just lots of opportunities for cool stuff to happen. But mostly I've been accused of being a person who puts out fires, right? I'm like dealing with the present a lot and not planning the future a ton to like stick with the plan, because things change all the time. When I do make a plan, it often has to be very flexible. So I want to make a consistent schedule to have, like, if you're going to have a visit in a day, just make it around noon, right? I like printing at night. It's really good to just have that in my brain, that like set aside this time for that. I want to set aside better time for planning and dealing with my books, so I know more about my funding resources. Having goals of buying a printer eventually, just like a bigger printer would be nice. But right now it's fine because I can just go to Luther and have films printed bigger than I can do, and I send people to him all the time when I can't do jobs. So it's cool to have those networks. I want to have little coffee dates with India Armstrong at Carousel's Press. She's just a printer nearby who does cool stuff. So it's, just being able to get out more, I think, is my bigger goal, besides doing like business growth, right? That's also important, but it's kind of about managing myself at the end of the day, more so than looking forward to jobs that I don't know are there. I just don't know. I gotta also fall. I really like doing my own publishing in the fall. Like I said before, there's like these categories: graphic, painterly, index. Like these are systems that I want to continue to advance in my own publishing practice. So last year at Print Center, maybe it was the first of an annual thing. Maybe I won't be doing it with them every time. I'm not saying like I'm always going to have this space. It's going to be that every time. But if I have an archive that's more accessible, my website is so far from being updated, right? I have to update my website for my own use, but also so other people might be able to say like, hey, I want to have these prints in a show. Can you maybe loan them to me? And we'll work out framing costs so that at the end of the day, you get your piece back framed and it's all insured or something. Like these things I want to look forward to, but I need to stop and practice mindfulness and getting your act together with the future and business goals, and just, maybe plan a vacation.
Oh.
I don't do that.
There's a thought.
How could I do that? I work all the time. I really like it.
Right.
But it's like clearing my head. I do runs now. I go on little like jogs, which is like, I don't need to exert extra energy. I don't have extra energy. I put my best work into my work, right? But I find it so helpful to have just your heart working more functionally instead of it doing its most stressful thing, printing, right? Go for a run. And then when you're printing at your hardest pace, it's not that hard, like it is a whole practice that I'm trying to get used to. But getting back on Instagram, right? I don't need that distraction right now, but later on, I do see the benefit of having an archive and a little cheerleading squad of all the people who give a shit. That's nice.
Yeah. You are. Yes. So you are on Instagram, but not as active as you were probably a little while ago, but that's okay. I mean, as long as people can find you, that's what's important.
I'm around. But the other thing is, I was trying so hard to get the space. And in some ways, I'm like, great, I did the fundraising. I got the space. That took a lot of work to do the extra communication work of trying to explain to people what I needed their help with. But at the end of the day, instead of saying a Black woman was exploited today, yes, she was, but she also did it to herself. Like I put myself in this position. I could have done something or said something sooner to not be in that position. But if I'm choosing to be an institution, then I'm bearing all this weight on purpose, So I'm trying to find more mindful ways to just stay longevity driven instead of just putting out fires, because that's dangerous. But it's really good to come to these brick walls to just hit a wall is kind of a good thing, instead of trying to keep shape shifting around these problems that aren't going to be fixed until you stop and deal with them, you know?
Right. I like the idea of the institution, but I don't want you to become, I feel like the implication of institution is impersonal, right? And
Mm.
feel like your secret sauce is you.
That's what Selena said. Selena said something similar. But yeah, I appreciate you saying it like that too, because that's what I want to share, right? I want to go out and bring myself to people and bring all the equipment I need to share this knowledge, instead of it being so much about churning out production quickly. So institution is maybe not the best word, but there's a different way I can describe the
But your description of it was really good, and it didn't feel super impersonal and, the big, white man institution on the hill thing. But but yeah, I mean, I think we're similar. Like, I feel like I can seduce you into the print world. I feel like you're the same. It's a lot about education, of course. It's a lot about sharing passion and all that stuff. And I feel like I feel like we're kissing cousins on that one.
Oh, I'd love to be kissing cousin with you, Anne. That's so special. Thank you. I mean, it's great to have you as a mentor too, because there's a lot of goals that you've gone through a lot of this already, you know, and you've worked with a lot of people in your past that have made you a stronger person at the end of the day. Not today's not the end, but you know what I mean? Like, everyone has their own baggage, and to just see you persevering anyway is like very much a big thing, because you're dealing with a lot of different people that are trying to communicate with you, and other ones that are trying to reach out to you to then get themselves notoriety. You know, like, it's hard at the end of the day to be a representation of both, you know, internal structure and being able to bring people together without you necessarily being in the room podcast.
Well, yeah, that's a tough one.
But thank you for making this opportunity. It's really special to be able to talk with you about it. But I don't talk with anybody about this kind of stuff, you know?
Oh, wow.
And I get to share all this stuff.
Oh my gosh, you're so eloquent about it all. My goodness. You need to write a book.
Oh, I'll write a zine. I'll make a new zine.
There you go.
Okay, last thing I'll say. Speaking of zines, the counterculture is so important right now, because there is so much emphasis on, like, students shouldn't have their phones in school, but also we need our phones for real life, and you got to get at your kid if they have a school shoot. You know, like, there's all these contradictions in this digital age that make it hard to find yourself. Like, being bored is really important, and being able to draw out your own creativity is something that happens when you're bored. But I think that the countercultural revolution needs to be a thing, because we need to devalue these things that are supposed to be systems that aren't necessarily useful for everyone, right?
Right.
Being able to make small publications, being able to publish anything at all is kind of a way against the norm of practicing business as usual. So that's why I want to do business cards for people. Studio Sinja is another person I work with. She's a creative director, Rachel Elliott. So many different creatives are out there doing the hard work behind the scenes. So I think it's really important to show up and share that if I have the opportunity, because it's more than just me. Like, same with you. I know it. Like, you are a goldenrod of being able to share a lot of other people's stories too.
You know, the ecosystem is full of really, I mean, part of my thing is that there's so many different ways you can be involved in the arts and the ecosystem, particularly in printmaking, because there's so many facilities and functionalities and, all that stuff. But also, just by the nature of it being collaborative, we all love people and we all want to be useful to each other. And, for me, it's like the magical kingdom of the art world,
It's hard to know that unless you're a print maker, right? If you're a collector of prints, you maybe know that as well. But I think that the making of them really shows you how many you're getting, like the quantity thing of having this, like, package be delivered to a place and then them getting like thousands of dollars out of selling, like, I'm so protective of paper before it's printed, because it's valuable. It's hugely way more valuable than what you paid for it, because you know how to handle it to make it into something that's useful for someone else to sustain their lives, right? Like, I think it's I did this wonderful last thing. Happy to have received this from a bunch of kindergartners.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's so sweet.
Sweetest. A woman who drew this is named Mammy, and she works at, she has a vintage store in Bed-Stuy down the way. I know her from just going there all the time, buying scarves, what have you. But she has a 6-year-old, and they're in a group of like other 6-year-olds that do this like, let's go see all the different businesses in Bed-Stuy and learn something. We're 6, you know. I'm like, I'll go to you. I'll show you how I deal, right? Do that for free. Just set it up and have a time. It's an hour. And they give me this in return. It was so sweet.
That is sweet.
It's heartwarming to share what you do with people who care about it. I think that's
true.
The main thing. I'm just trying to use this little gift as like power to don't be afraid to share, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that is the secret sauce. And I think it's your magical power is just demonstrating that you can love what you do and be happy to share it and, you know, just encourage young things to grow. What better place to be?
Yes. I know. Here and now is really the only time. I think later or before now would not work. I got, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we've been talking for a long time, although I could talk to you for hours.
Tell time. It's really not my specialty.
That's all right. People will start following you if they don't already. I'm sure they do. And they will start paying attention to all the fabulous things you are doing because you are a shining cog in the I don't even know, the firmament of
art stuff.
That's
art
right.
Things.
Yeah. I love watching what you're doing. And I'm here to support you. Well, Leslie, you're a delight. I love chatting with you. Thank you for coming on the show today. It's been really great.
I hope you can come visit next time you're in Brooklyn.
Yes, I probably will be there soon. Thanks for listening to this episode of Platemark with my guest, Leslie Diuguid. I find her not only hilarious, but lovely and so smart. I am so looking forward to having her be an exhibitor at the Brooklyn Fine Art Print Fair, which, as I said at the top, I'm helping Luther Davis organize for Powerhouse Arts in Gowanus. It is running concurrently with the IFPDA Print Fair, so that would be March 27 to 30, 2025 in New York. And I hope you will schedule enough time to hit both fairs, because that's what you should do. Let's see. Thanks, as usual, go to a host of people, primarily, of course, to Leslie for being a wonderful guest, and then also to Dan Fury for being my sound guy. Thanks, Dan. And to Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. One also goes out to Lee Turner and Skip Barnhart for sending me soundscapes from their studios, which is what I pieced together at the top and bottom of the pod. All right, well, I hope you've marked your calendars for the Brooklyn Fine Art Print Fair, March 27 to 30. Please do it, and please make every effort to get there, because we are working our tuckuses off to get it all together. All right, we will see you next time.